Hello, I am Joshua Humphreys, comedy novelist, playwright, sometimes historian, occasional mermaid, gallivanter, Venice enthusiast, and now curator of these talks, giver of this podcast called Unlost Causes, where I'm going to unstrangle for you the wondrous world of culture and share with you my enthusiasm for the forgotten ideals of art, history, and philosophy. I run a thing called the New Cavalier Reading Society, dedicated to discussing mankind's most profound questions as explored by humanity's greatest minds. The New Cavalier Reading Society has been running for 2 years now, and it's the discussions we've had there have been 3 semesters so far, that have inspired me to start this podcast. My background is as a comedian. I'm a comedian who writes books rather than a writer who happens to be funny. And I hope here to lighten for you the world of culture, to clarify much of what can sometimes seem incomprehensible, and to make much more accessible a world which very boring people take way too seriously. That is, by delighting in and explaining some of the forbidden loyalties and forsaken ideals of art, history, and philosophy, the rejuvenating concepts which stand dormant in enormous, dusty bookshelves, which I feel should, as soon as possible, make their way back out into the real world. Why? Because civilization makes life possible, but it's culture that makes life worth living. In Manhattan, the Woody Allen film, the main character is contemplating suicide, and he asks himself, why is life worth living? Why is life worth living? The short version of the answer that he gives is Mozart, Cezanne, Groucho Marx, and Louis Armstrong. Specifically, this song. I'll get it for you. Hang on a minute. You get the gist. That is, it is culture that makes life worth living, and it's a wondrous conception of culture that I hope to impart to you through these talks. The questions and the explorations that will form these unlost causes come primarily from my Commonplace books. I've been taking reading notes for 10 years, and my Commonplace books, which now run to 3 volumes, contain those 10 years worth of notes. These are the books here. They're only available to the New Cavalier Reading Society and its members. They have over 4,000 quotations and paragraphs from more than 800 different writers, poets, philosophers, soldiers, statesmen, composers, comedians, on 700 separate subjects. And I'll just show you very quickly what's inside them. Hang on a second. And as I first began to run the Reading Society, I indexed the Commonplace books by author and subject, and I found that of those 700 subjects, some appeared much more frequently than others. History, ancient Greece and Rome, religion, progress, education, happiness, hard work, art, truth, freedom. These all appeared at least 4 times more frequently than any other subject. And so those 10 subjects ended up forming the basis of what would become the New Cavalier Reading Society textbook. That book is called the Enchiridion, which is Latin via Greek for small handbook containing vital information. And the Enchiridion, as well as inspiring the discussion in the New Cavalier Reading Society, now forms the core of these unlost causes. The first unlost cause shall deal with education, culture, and excellence, all the way down to work, struggle, and action, because it is my firm belief that the end of all learning is not just doing, but doing excellently. So those 2 subjects will bookend these unlost causes. There'll be interludes and asides. I don't know how many episodes there'll be. Perhaps it should go on until I get to interview Norm Macdonald, Mel Gibson, and Michael Jordan all in the same room at the same time. But I plan on doing a lecture devoted to classical music, biographies of some of the geniuses who appear most frequently among the 800 authors in those Commonplace books, perhaps one dedicated to Venice, and, I hope, entire episodes dedicated to questions which you submit. I'm starting out blind. I have no idea how to make a podcast or what to put into one. I've never actually listened to a podcast before. But it is one of my maxims that you should start before you are ready. I'm not ready, but if you'll come along with me through these unlost causes on this adventure through 3,000 years of culture, these lectures will grow, I shall grow with them, and if you do come along for the adventure, I hope that you'll grow with them as well. The podcast, as I said, is on YouTube as well. The video of this episode is already live. And do please comment and ask questions there. I think you can ask questions here in Podbean, but I'm not sure. This is all very new to me. So if you do head over to YouTube and leave comments and ask questions, and I can see what I can rustle up. Now these books, these Unlost Causes, this worldview, this Weltanschauung, there's your first fancy German word, there'll be a few of them. These are a personal view of that much bandied about word, culture, as must any view of culture be. But Unlost Causes is essentially me, a comedy novelist, someone who's been ensconced in the world of culture for rather a long time, someone with a history degree, someone who's profoundly immature and does walk around in swimming shorts most of the time, and who watches way more sitcoms than he does documentaries. This is me attempting to share with you my enthusiasm for the glorious, million-faceted world of culture. The biggest human inspiration for me doing these, I'll start by noting, is the man who taught me to love the humanities, Professor Bill Murray. I'm not sure if he's still alive. He was my first history professor. I studied history at La Trobe University in Melbourne, and I remember him walking into the lecture theatre, a massive lecture theatre, and him, a 70-year-old Scotsman with high white hair and a tattered blue jumper, commanding everyone's attention for 50 minutes as he sang and yelled in French, entirely without notes, gesticulating, performing. His passion for history shone from every phrase. The whole lecture theatre was enthralled. And then his tutorials, he would spend the first 5 minutes taking us through South Park, which was always the tutorials were on Tuesday, South Park was on Monday night. And he would be laughing. Then he'd take us through the news, always shaking his head and laughing at the folly of the forgetting world. But then his love of history, his knowledge of the personalities and their interactions down through the centuries. You got the impression that he had conversed with giants, was conversing with giants in front of you, and that he wanted to introduce us to them so that we could get to know them as well. He passed his passion and his enthusiasm for the humanities on to me, and that enthusiasm has not diminished in the 10 years since I was an undergraduate, and so I now hope to pass it on to you. The humanities, art, history, and philosophy, the humanities, which many people now claim are either pointless or bigoted. You hear the study of the humanities is outdated. The study of the humanities is rape culture, dead white men. They call these dead white men as though they were being inventive. To these people I say, do please go on believing all this, because the frivolousness of your intellect paired with the depth and brilliance of the humanities can only lead to your hilarious further embarrassment. To you, culture hater, Dutch hater, I would argue that everything is pointless except for the humanities. What is life without art? What's tomorrow without yesterday? Money without meaning? Life, tomorrow, and money you may all very well have, but without meaning, which alone the common inheritance of noble humanity can give. Whatever the hell would you want all these things for? The humanities encompass all human action and are pointless only if all human action is. But all that matters, you say, is money. And the modern hierarchy of rich to poor is the most natural that has yet existed on earth. Joshua Humphreys, you must be a poor person, otherwise you'd be out trading hedgerows and short-selling bill oddities. Well, I would say that Mark Zuckerberg idolizes Caesar Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and is emulating him in a great many ways. He's trying to impose upon the world a pax technologia, the global reign of a single corporation, his. Augustus slandered his enemies, he patronized artists who celebrated his new ideal for Rome, imperium sine fine, sovereignty without end. And upon a single word, your word, money, via a grounding in the humanities, you've just travelled from San Francisco to Italy and Egypt and back, across 2,000 years, 3 continents, countless civilizations, and by emulating the methods and ambitions of a long-dead white man, you are the world's 5th richest person, and are making $1 million an hour. There is no present without a past. There is no seeing the future without learning from the millennia-long adventure that is our common human inheritance. No deciphering what you see around you without knowing that people once saw also what you saw, and they bought it. This is Gibbon, the great 18th century historian. Augustus was sensible that mankind is governed by names, nor was he deceived in his expectation that the people would submit to slavery, provided they were respectfully assured that they still enjoyed their ancient freedom. And so, under Caesar Augustus, the people adoringly accepted the end of a 400-year-old republic. because they were respectfully assured that they still enjoyed their ancient freedom. The Humanities connects you to the past, and by connecting you to the past, inserts you more fully and vastly more knowingly into the present. An Oxford professor of philosophy once told his new students that they were about to embark on a noble adventure that would teach them nothing, except for being able to detect when people are talking crap. That is to say, to discern between lies and truth. The Humanities are the antidote to what you call wellness, but which is in fact bullshit. And I do believe very firmly that if everybody in some way, however small, returned to the Humanities, whether it's studying the lives and work of a single period of painters, of one statesman, the history of just one city, the mind of a single philosopher, half the operas of half a composer, that so much of the spiritual emptiness before which people everywhere moan in misery and offence, that emptiness would evaporate, if not at least diminish. Wellness exists as a solution to loneliness, to isolation, to disconnectedness. Its equation runs like this: you are disconnected, I have the solution to your disconnectedness. Give me $3,000 and come to Bali and I will tell you that solution. 20 people sign up, and some vacuous, charcoal-eating, fart-sniffing smoothie fiend makes 50 grand off your loneliness. But what I believe is that it's not at all that people are disconnected. It's that they are connecting with the wrong things. But still they go to Bali, they dry hump the earth and lick a rock, they hug one another and get pee-hole infections from a waterfall, and they feel jubilant, rejuvenated, connected. They fly home, but in 6 months they're searching for the next wellness retreat because the first one didn't take. But we, who exist in the real world, in the once and future realm of the Humanities, know that all the connection you'll ever need is to be found in the boundless domain of culture. When Epictetus says, "As rich as the man who has not enough is the man who cannot have enough," you have in just 16 words the solution to almost any worldly misery. We are disconnected not because we need to discover the alchemical path of our brave soul journey, blah, 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 blah. Rather, we are disconnected because we're trying to connect to things that are unworthy or incapable of human connection. What is worthy and capable of human connection? Well, that is a matter for this series entire. With these unlost causes, I shall present to you the ancient, medieval, and modern roots of what makes us, and what makes us great, things to which a great many people were once connected, and in being connected, dared greatly, and achieved things that echo through eternity. What we do in life echoes in eternity. I am Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, and general of the Felix legions, and loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, husband to a murder, and the Humanities, these unlost causes, not only nourish the mind, but also the spirit, and you will, in the adventure upon which I am about to send you, touch upon God. If you're wise, the many conceptions of God, Hindu, Jewish, Buddhist, and yes, gasp, the Christian idea of God, now 1,986 years old, your own conception of God, from which you are probably, right now, delinquent. I'll be presenting to you a web so large that it cannot be contained within a yoga studio, nor even in a 5-star Balinese resort. A web so large that it can't even fit into physical space. It's thousands of years old and is every moment new. It upsets entirely Einstein's theory of relativity. A conversation so loud and glorious, so large and profound that it needs an entire universe to contain it. Beethoven is now in outer space. So is Chuck Berry, but Beethoven's in outer space. Voyager 1 has left the heliosphere. Beethoven is in the region of the universe which only contains matter not created by our sun. That's how large this conversation is, this wondrous world of culture, this conversation entirely devoid of bullshit, this adventure that in fact renders you immune to bullshit. And what might happen, and I don't think it would be a bad thing at all, what might happen is you see people load themselves up with what the television and newspapers and Twitter tell them is culture, but still they feel empty. Just like those wellness retreat people, because what they're imbibing is in fact not culture, but marketing. You're being sold the arts by corporations, sold the arrogance of up-to-datedness by communications conglomerates, and it makes you feel good for a moment. You can say to someone you've just met that in fact you have been to the latest exhibition at the National Gallery. And you jerk each other off for a bit, you exchange wristies, show each other the selfies you took beside your favourite sculptures. But soon you find that that exhibition in fact gave you no real consolation. That it still leaves you lonely in the hours before dawn, satisfies none of your curiosity about the meaning and proper ends of life, and it disappears. But real culture, Real culture stays with you always. Real culture is the companion to your last thought before sleep, your constant encouragement, your most outlandish motivation. It is a never-ending fire that always warms the heart, an entire universe of delight, which at the slightest recall elicits a smile wherever and whenever you are. And what might happen is that if we return to the proper study of proper culture, to what Heinrich Heine called die verdammten Fragen, the accursed questions, there's your second fancy German phrase, those questions whose exploration deals wholly and in the end satisfactorily with human existence, if those questions became our common language, rather than hashtags and portmanteaux and acronyms and the gibberish of a false consoling modernity, what might happen is that if we return to existing within culture, that conversation the size of the universe, and we spend so much time with it and it alone that it becomes a part of who we are, enters the very fabric of our daily lives and all our discourse, we might go outside and we might find that the world in fact does not in any way satisfy, live up to, or reflect actual noble human existence. And through a reading of history, through a familiarity with culture, we might remember that there once was a world that did. And then we might start to remake the world in a new image that does. You see, culture is not only what makes life worth living, culture is very dangerous. Just as Gibbon said, that's why you're fed a watered-down version of it in school, in newspapers, at train stations, on televisions and Facebook feeds. You are respectfully assured again and again that you still enjoy your ancient freedom. But in reality, your personality, your Weltanschauung, your worldview, what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot say, has been mercilessly abridged, and the pace continues to hasten. Culture is bloody, culture is violent, culture is dirty, culture smells like victory. Charlie, don't surf! For culture imbues the mind with ideals, now dead ideals, what might even be termed lost causes. We are told everywhere to have no ideal, but that of the law-abiding, never-complaining, tolerant of all bullshit consumer. We're told we have to love the works of people whose diminished experience is in no way our own, to value movements hostile to everything our grandparents and we held dear, to embrace all people, no matter how deceitful, ugly, and servile these people might be. But culture is dangerous, for culture reveals to the mind such wild ideals as truth and beauty and freedom, as well as their obverse, falsehood, ugliness, and slavery. And these opposites now exist everywhere, but we don't recognize them as such because we're told constantly that we are freer than ever, that our cities are more beautiful than any on earth, that the truth has never been so universally accepted as it is now. But culture teaches us to call a spade, a lie, an aberration, and slavery, our slavery. So if we, who become used to existing in truth and beauty and freedom, go out into the world, we might find that the world, despite Netflix ramming the country down our throats, that the world is made up almost entirely of ugliness, lies, and enslavement. And we might one day start suggesting that we would like to return to truth and beauty and freedom. We might start to strive for these in our private lives, and once one life, our own, has been transformed, so might then a second. And those two transform two of their own, and so on exponentially, till humanity stops wearing t-shirts and going to music festivals, and once again creates things that make the world a more beautiful and freer place, rather than a very much uglier and depressingly more boring one. Here, of course, you get into the Hegelian idea of history, and the accursed question of whether the mind makes the world, or does the world make the mind. We'll come to that when I talk about history in a few weeks. But this idea, I think, comes from Ruskin. Ruskin wrote that it's impossible for us to have right ideas about colour unless we see the lovely colours of nature unspoiled. Impossible for us to supply beautiful incident and action in our art unless we see beautiful incident and action in the world. He was talking about making people whole, or rather making whole people, not just fitting them for a factory or an accounting firm or a viral marketing startup. A whole person. The Humanities makes whole people. I don't know how many partial people you've met, but I guarantee you that one whole person is very much more interesting than a lifetime of partial ones. What exactly do I mean by a whole person? Homer, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, writes only of demigods, kings, and princes. Yet they became heroes to centuries of people from all social classes. This is because Homer treated his characters as humans, and because the Greeks strived as humans for wholeness. They didn't look at one aspect of a character and define them thus. They didn't look at Achilles and say, well, he has blue eyes and looks quite like Brad Pitt. I should call him a dead white man and never listen to him again. In the humanities, there are no black, there are no white, there are no straight, there are no gay. No male, no female. In the humanities, there are only human beings in all their infinite potential, eternal striving, their perennial imperfection. Aldous Huxley, taker of LSD and author of Brave New World, says the same of the people who vivified the English Renaissance. So sensual and yet so spiritual, such men of action and so much enamoured of contemplation, religious and cynical. The modern historian is frightened by the spectacle of human beings who dared to be free, to realize all their natural diversity, to be wholly alive. Wholly alive, whole people. And it's my enthusiasm for the thoughts and actions of these whole people, for everyone who has ever dared to be free, that I hope to pass on to you. My enthusiasm for the pursuit of truth and beauty and freedom, all of which are found in greatest abundance in the humanities. Madame de Stael, one of the only people to openly defy Napoleon and live to tell the tale, said, once enthusiasm is ridiculed, all is lost except money and power. If I shared my money with you, you'd be very disappointed. And I have no power. I'm merely a novelist, traveling the world trying to create something that will make you laugh. So all I can share with you is my enthusiasm. The first episode, the first Unlost Cause, will be education, culture, and excellence. And I'm going to tell you that the sole aim of education is the attainment of wealth. And you might think, this is a goddamn pyramid scheme. I knew it. Josh was going to fleece me for $20 and build a pyramid. Or you're going to say that you agree. And that's why you studied business marketing. But I can tell you that I hate building pyramids and would never even think of developing an entire scheme just to construct one. I can also tell you that the more marketing degrees you have, the further you probably are from wealth. True wealth. Not of the bank account, but of the mind and the soul. And that is next week. Education, culture, and excellence, all of which I consider to be the single-minded pursuit and subsequent attainment of immeasurable wealth. Unlost Causes, where I, a lowly comedy novelist, shall attempt to unstrangle for you the wondrous world of culture and impart to you some of my enthusiasm for the wholly alive people who dared to be free and in daring enriched human existence by making a fuller life possible for the rest of us. Subscribe to this channel, to my YouTube channel. Find the podcast and subscribe to that if you want, but there'll be videos as well as podcasts each week. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and tune in next week when I shall unstrangle for you the unlost causes of education, culture, and excellence. I am Joshua Humphreys, and peace, I'm out of here! No, I should leave you with something slightly more intelligent than an Adam Sandler quotation. Where are we? Here we go. Volume 3 of my Commonplace book. This is actually from Elon Musk's favorite book. Called 12 Against the Gods. We, like the eagles, were born to be free, yet we are obliged, in order to live at all, to make a cage of laws for ourselves and to stand on the perch. We are born as wasteful and unremorseful as tigers. We are obliged to be thrifty, or starve, or freeze. We are born to wander, and cursed to stay and dig, and so the adventurous is our first choice. Unlost Causes. Next week, education, culture, and excellence. Subscribe to my videos. Find the podcast. Comment, like, and whatever else you do on YouTube videos. I am Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, and general of the Felix Legions, and loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Husband to a murdered wife, father to a murdered son, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Didn't work. Why isn't that working? Hello? Why would you do that? You douchebag.